the dog. I, I had somebody for work ask me if I could do something, and my response was, I can't. I have to take my kid to the vet.
Be happy, happy.
We are so happy to have Paige Connell with us today. She helped us with the invisible load.
I love that.
So happy that you found her, Shelly, and brought her on. I think that it is such an important conversation that is never had. And that is why it is called the invisible load.
I love this owning instead of helping.
And then she even brought it back to when you're dating someone, how can you start having these conversations? Finding a way that works for you. Not every couple is the same.
This idea of it's the two of us, the two of us suggests team. Looking at it that way seems like there's strength in numbers. That really hit me. It just it felt right. She's
Mhm.
beautiful, so well spoken, and so clear, which is so helpful in understanding her messaging. And I'm really excited about listening to this.
To all of you listeners out there, this is an absolute listen to anyone out there. And those of you out there who don't even have children, who are considering having children, who are maybe dating someone for the first time, these are really, really important conversations to have. And again, yes, she's so clear. I loved this conversation.
CMU in the house with Paige.
Mhm.
So, talk to us about what it is that you feel that you would like to see big picture from partners.
Sure. I mean, I think in an ideal world, right, we wouldn't just have our homes set up for equity. We would have the world and our workplaces and, everything working towards the same goal. I think one of the reasons this is such a hard conversation and it's difficult for me to say, like, what would I want? There's many things that I want, but the mental load conversation is connected to things like the lack of paid parental leave and the lack of affordable childcare and the motherhood penalty and the wage gap, right? Like all of these things are tied together. And the reason women tend to bear the burden of the mental load is first and foremost because we're conditioned to and we're expected to. And there's these gendered norms, especially in motherhood, where we just assume they're going to take it on. But also because of the fact that we don't have paid parental leave. And so if somebody's going to take an unpaid leave, it's usually mom. And during that time, she takes on a lot of work and she doesn't get to hand that back at the end of her maternity leave, right? There's no like transition of the responsibilities. And so slowly over time, she is seen as this default person and she takes on more and more work. And so, in an ideal world, we would have men very, very involved from the get go, even before kids are there, right? I think this starts even when you're thinking about marriage or thinking about becoming parents. I always tell people, when it came time to try to conceive, I was tracking my ovulation and researching prenatals and scheduling doctor's appointments and getting my blood drawn. And my partner was just kind of there waiting to be told what to do along the way. And even when I was pregnant, the same thing, right? I go to all of these appointments. I'm monitoring my blood pressure. I'm checking the apps and researching pediatricians and all things that he's also capable of participating in, right? But we don't often expect men to do that. Men are not involved in those very early days. And so that transition to women becoming the default for all things parenting, it just happens very, very early on in the process. And so in an ideal world, men would be hand in hand with us throughout the entirety of this. They would be just as involved in all aspects. They would be waking up overnight, even if they're not breastfeeding, to help change a diaper and to soothe the baby back to sleep. Men would be beside us in an equitable way. And I don't say equal because I don't think equal is possible in any home or any relationship. There's just too much nuance and too many moving pieces for it to always feel exactly equal. But how do we make it fair? Right. And can we make it that way throughout the entirety of this relationship as much as possible?
100%. Oh my gosh. I love how you bring it back to, I hadn't even thought of that, to when the baby is in the womb. All the books we read, all the prep that we do, all of the little organization of the closet for the baby clothes, all of, the appointments, like you said. Wow.
So many
I,
appointments.
I didn't think about it going back that far, but it's true.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Yeah, it's not just like when the new life is in the home. It's like, oh, yeah. I mean, I will say the appointment logs. I mean, we just had Amy Marie on to talk about managing ADHD in moms. And she talked
Mm.
about that, about like making the orthodontist appointment and like just sometimes how difficult that can be.
Yeah. Because there's so many. I mean, it's for, I have 4 kids. So, like, it's like we have an appointment every day, I feel like. But it's not just the appointment, right? It's knowing there's an appointment, calling the school to tell them the kid won't be there. Because if you don't, they'll call and yell at you because you forgot to tell the school they weren't coming. And then paperwork you have to bring back to the school and the insurance checking to make sure they were going to cover the blood work and then paying the copay. There's a million little pieces to every single appointment. So it's not just making the appointment or going to the appointment, it's all the pieces. It's filling out all the paperwork and answering all the questions. I think, people often think about this work and they think about the one small action, which is like taking the kid to the appointment, when in reality there was like probably 4 or 5 steps to get to that point. And then you're constantly doing that for yourself, for your dog. I'm thinking about that. I'm giving him his flea and tick medicine this morning. It's like that doesn't just happen. I have to remember that.
Right. Wow,
Yeah.
Paige. I mean, oh my God. Okay. So talk to us a little bit about what inspired you to take action on all of this?
Yeah, I was just living it. I think for me, partially the reason I became desperate to do something was because I became a parent like 6 or 7 months before the pandemic. And so I was really thrown into
With your first?
motherhood. Yeah, my oldest two, we were foster parents. So we were fostering our two oldest. And then a pandemic hit, and then I was pregnant. And then we adopted them 6 months later, and then I gave birth 3 months later, 4 months later, something like that. So I went from no kids to 3 kids in a year, basically, which is
Right.
a
Right.
lot. And throw a pandemic on top of it, right? Working from home with your kids, all of those things. My husband is a first responder, so he was never able to work from home. Not one day during that pandemic. Didn't matter what was going on. And I was always home. And so my office shut down. I was at home, daycare shut down. So I was pregnant with a 2-year old and a 1-year old at home with me working full time. And again, I became the default, like so many women were during the pandemic. I was the default. But not only was I the default, I was also a new mom. And so everything had just kind of quickly fallen into my plate. And not necessarily because my husband put it there, right? But these circumstances made it really difficult to share it in a way that felt fair at the time. And then as we slowly started to climb out of that period, I realized I was still holding all of it, right? My kids were back at daycare. I was working full time, but somehow I'd become responsible for every meal and I'd become responsible for every doctor's appointment and I'd become responsible for every email communication with a school or a doctor, any of those things. And after the birth of our fourth, I really did reach a breaking point where I said, I need more. I need your help. I cannot do this by myself. I will not do this by myself. And if I'm going to, I'm just going to really do it by myself. Like I was just like, it's frustrating because my husband, like many others, is a really great hands-on dad, always here. Like if I was like, "Can you cook dinner?" He would never say no, right? Like he would never say no to any of those things. He was very much the kind of guy who was saying, "How can I help? Tell me what to do. I'll do it. What do you need from me?" But he wasn't the owner of anything. Ultimately, like I was the project manager of the home and I was constantly delegating things to him. But if he forgot or the ball got dropped, it was my job to pick it up. And I was tired of that and I was exhausted from it and burnt out and resentful, which wasn't good for our marriage. And so I heard Eve Rodsky, the author of Fair Play, on a podcast, and it was like a light bulb went off in my brain, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is it." And so I read her book, and then there was one. I had a day like in her book, she talks about the blueberry incident. I had an incident, a day where I was like, "This is it. Like, I refuse to proceed any further. We have to fix this." And we just started working on it. We read Fair Play, we did the game, and then I don't that wasn't the end all be all for us. That wasn't the only solution, but it was our starting point, and it really was what got us going, working towards equity, and that was almost exactly 3 years ago.
Wow. Yeah, because I was going to ask you who would you feel inspired you also to take a little
Yeah.
charge of this publicly, and so that's interesting because we've had conversations about Eve Brodsky before
We've
too.
talked about Eve. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love even her work, and I think it's a really great starting place. I often hear from people, I do wanna make this note, that they'll say, like, "We did fair play, but it didn't work," or, "We tried fair play, but it wasn't enough," or, "Yeah, fair play, but my husband has ADHD," whatever it might be, right? There's, like, a version of that conversation. I always tell people there are all different tools and methods and resources out there for you, and now more than ever, people are talking about the mental load, like, literally on my desk is another book about the mental load. Like, there's a million books, and apps and all the things. Take what works for your family, right? So don't try to force your family into a method. Take from that method what works for your family, right? So I love fair play. We don't follow that to a T in our home. We took what worked and we left what didn't, and we proceeded from there. And that is really how I encourage people to have these conversations, which is, all of our homes are unique. There's a lot of nuance to this conversation, and we can learn from a lot of different places and figure out what works for our homes. But, I think for all of us, there's a starting point. And so you got to figure out what that starting point looks like.
I love that you say a starting point. And I think that so many women, I'm speaking of women right now too, and it's, it's partners, but
Yeah.
the one who takes on that mental load. For me personally, I think that again, like you talk about society, whatever, patriarchy, for whatever reason, the systems have been in place. And so a lot of what I took on, I thought that that was my job. And
Mm.
because my husband was working full time and very long hours in television, wouldn't come home till late at night. It became I was the manager of the household, but I was
Yeah.
also doing my work at the same time. Luckily, I could work from home. And without even realizing it, I had taken on so much. And we are now in divorce process. I think, probably a little over 6 months that we've had separate households. And
Mm.
this is with all the respect in the world to my ex. We have a great relationship. But I found it so interesting when, we were having these conversations about custody, and even our mediator would say, okay, so we need to onboard him. It's like an onboarding process. And I loved that word onboarding because when I started thinking about it's not just, let's say, 50% or 30% of just taking the children, it is everything on top of it. And then we started, God bless him, he's now like, wow, I didn't
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
the appointments, the arranging of the play dates, the connecting
Mm.
with the other parents so that you can make the play dates.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm actually not that close to a lot of these parents, and it's not his fault. A lot of it was I just took it on. And this whole like revelation has been one for us that is just incredible. This is why I'm so happy you're here. Help other couples get to a place where they can have these discussions before it's too late.
Yeah.
I guess you said like it's a starting point. Have the conversation. Okay.
First and foremost, I agree. I think the sooner we can have these conversations, the better. I think you don't have to have kids. You don't have to be married. You can be dating. You don't even have to live together to have these conversations. I think about stuff. A young girl reached out to me. She was 23, 24, I don't know, in a serious relationship. And she said, I'm worried about this stuff. And I said, I get it. I'd be worried too. Because I married a guy I'd been with since I was 16. I thought I knew, right? I thought I knew what he was like. And I thought I knew what it was going to be. And the data actually shows that even couples that are egalitarian before kids tilt to mom after kids. Even if they were earning the same and they were in this household that really believed in a fair share, when kids come along, these gender norms just are so strong. And it's just even in the way the systems work, right? When I gave birth, I remember everybody was like, Mom, did the baby poop? And I'm like, Dad's holding her. Why aren't we asking dad? Like, I'm over here recovering from a C section. Can somebody else answer the question? Like, the assumption is like mom knows. And I
Right.
did. I knew, but there was no inclusion of him in that conversation. And I think people are getting better about including dad in these conversations. But I think, we can have these conversations from a very young age and start checking things out in the sense that, like, if you're dating a guy and he's got siblings, does he buy his parents gifts at Christmas or does he rely on his siblings to do it? And then he just Venmos them money? Because in my family dynamic, my brother is the youngest of three sisters. He's the only boy. And we used to just be like, hey, this is the gift, send us the money. Or he would text us and say, did you get her a gift? Can I send you money? And the assumption was that we were doing that work, carrying that mental load for him. And I'm happy to say my brother has come a long way. Last year, he came up with the gift idea. He's like, I've got a good idea. I don't know if his wife came up with it or if he did. Regardless, he presented it. He,
Regardless, he did it.
he
Yeah.
presented it to the siblings, right? But I think that's an important part of this. This doesn't just exist in romantic relationships. It doesn't just exist in parenting. It
Right.
exists well before that. And so we can start to kind of identify these things early on and ask questions of the people we're dating, like, what was your home like? And if they say, oh, my mom was amazing, she was the rock, you go, oh, okay, what does that mean, the rock? Like, did she, you know, what do you think it looks like to be the rock of a family? I want to know what that means to you. Does it mean I do all the laundry? Does it mean that I'm a support system emotionally? You can start to have these conversations. But I think logistically, when it comes to actually doing the work, when you live with somebody or you have kids, you have to make that invisible labor visible. So, in whatever way that works for you. So, for me, I have an iPhone. There's a reminders app that is a default app on your iPhone. I use that app and I keep track of every single thing that pops into my brain. So, I'm looking at it right now and it says, get my son's blood pressure checked because he's on a new medication. I have to check that. Buy new shoes for my 3 year old because her feet are getting too big. Give a book to a friend. She asked for that book. Like, it's just a reminders list of all of the things that I have to do. And I'm looking at it now Today I have 11 tasks, but I have 43 total things listed here.
Now, do you
So
share that with your husband?
this is just mine. No, my husband has his own. So my husband does not like a reminders app. He likes to use like a physical paper. My husband has ADHD. He likes the act of like writing it down, having it on paper, checking it off, and starting new every single day. I like the digital version. And I tell people this all the time. What works for him doesn't have to work for me. What works for me doesn't have to work for him. But you need to be able to make this invisible labor visible and be able to share it with each other. Look at it and say, hey, these are the things that we have going on. This is the work that's happening, and so this is my to-do list. He has his to-do list and it's just as long as mine, right? Because we share this work together. But when we started, the way we did it was Eve has a game that goes along with the book, Fair Play, which is a deck of cards. That didn't work for my brain. It wasn't how I operate. But what I did was I basically took the idea of that game and I put it into a spreadsheet instead. And so we listed everything that happens in our house, all of those tasks, and then put our names next to the ones we owned. And then we said, does this feel fair? And when we looked at it, at the time I had, I think, 65 and he had 15. And we're like, well, that doesn't feel fair. Right? That doesn't feel
Right.
like when you look at the numbers, it just isn't fair. And so from there, we started to work through it. But you have to really be able to look at it and quantify it, because what often happens is women come to their husband and they say, I'm burnt out, I'm exhausted. And he says, well, what can I do? How can I help? Tell me what to do and I'll do it. And then she goes, I don't even know where to start, because if I give you this task, that task is tied to 16 other tasks. And I don't know how to give you all of that right now. And so instead I'm going to say, can you empty the dishwasher? And that's really not going to get me anywhere at all. So, it is it's a layered conversation and we have to treat it that way.
You're
Well,
so
and
right.
I always say this though, right, Cher? I always say like that I appreciate the like, what can I do to help? But I always say that's one more thing that I have to do is to think about the things that I have to ask you to do or tell you to do or whatever it is. And that adds to my mental load big
Mhm.
because, I also have ADHD, so I have my own ways of doing things. And
Yeah.
I have to add one more thing. I just feel like, I'm not able to manage that load. So my gripe with that is as much as it's well intended, it also feels like, tell me how I can help. Maybe the thing is, here, look at the spreadsheet.
Well, I think when you ask somebody how I can help, essentially what you're saying is it's your responsibility. I'm just here to help. You own this, but I'm the helper, right? So, and what happens is, it might have been something like if I said to my husband, "Hey, can you call the plumber?" And, we'll just use it as an example. "Hey, can you call the plumber?" And then he's like, "Yeah, absolutely, no problem." And then 2 days later I go, "Hey, did you schedule the plumber?" He goes, "Oh shoot, I forgot." "Yes, I will do that." And then I say, "Okay, cool, great." And then he schedules the plumber and I have to be home when the plumber's here, but he doesn't add it to the calendar. And now I'm saying, hey, when is the plumber coming? Okay, the plumber's coming on this day. Okay, well, I had a work meeting. So well, now I have to move my, it's a whole thing, right? So what it did was it kept the accountability and the responsibility of the task with me, even if he physically called the plumber, right? Like it would have just been easier for me to call the
Like,
plumber.
you can just call the plumber.
Right.
Right.
And so what actually has to happen is your partner has to be accountable to the entirety of that task. It's his job to know the plumber has to be called, call the plumber, add it to the calendar, make sure that I'm available, check with me, am I available to be there with the plumber on that day? And really see that whole task through. Dinner is a good example. One of the first things my husband said he would do is dinner. He's like, I don't mind cooking. And it's so funny because he's eating his words now. I don't mind cooking dinner. I love cooking dinner. Easy. I said, great, you cook dinner. But every single day he would come to me and he would say, what should I make? And I was like,
Right.
do not make me responsible for what you're making. Like if you are cooking dinner, you have to meal plan. You have to know what's in the fridge, what's in the pantry. You have to keep an inventory of what the kids are going to eat, what they don't eat. Like this is your job. And because if I tell you to make something and then all the kids hate it, it's my fault. And like then I'm still accountable to a portion of dinner and you didn't have to think about it, right? You just cooked it. And cooking's not the hard part. That's the easy part. It's being the person who's always thinking about dinner. And so now here we are 3 years later and my husband's like I absolutely hate cooking dinner.
Ah,
and and we both do. And so we've collectively decided that a few nights a week we're going to do meal kits. It's also we're in a phase of life with sports and we're like who has the time to cook a full dinner? Collectively we've decided that, but it's funny because I think a lot of men will say, that's not hard. I'll do that. And then when
right.
they're actually responsible for every aspect of a task, they go, okay, I get it now. This is actually a lot of work. This is not just cooking dinner and spending 40 minutes. It's the constant knowing of what people like, what they don't like, what meat we have, what we don't have, when we have to go to the store, what's on the grocery list, like the whole thing. And so I know a lot of women also dislike the word help because it insinuates that it's their job. So it's not helping, it's owning, really fully owning something and being accountable to it that actually allows your partner to not think about it. I don't think about the groceries, for example. My husband does I don't think about the groceries. If we run out of something, I'll tell him, but I don't have to wonder if he's doing it and when he's doing it. I just know he's going grocery shopping. And it's not really something I have to constantly be keeping track of.
Love that shift in word, owning versus helping.
Mm,
That's great. Very clear.
that's the goal.
Creative Mamas Unplugged is produced by Breatheasy Productions with music by Jeremy Jurin. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to give my mama 5 stars and keep coming back. Thanks to us kids, there are plenty of stories to tell. And you are not alone.
We are inspired by you. Thank you for joining our Creative Mamas community. Please give us a 5-star rating, leave a comment, support Creative Mamas Unplugged on Patreon to get your name in the credits, receive extra content, and earn some fun prizes. With this, we can keep creating, uplifting, and growing this incredible community together. We love you so much. Applause!